If you know anything about CPU architecture, you've probably heard of a stack before. But what is it, and how can we add stack support to our CPU? Stay tuned, because our CPU is about to get stacked up in this episode. Hello everyone, my name is Mike and you're watching Polymath Unlimited. In this series, we are designing a Logisim simulation of an 8-bit CPU with the following design goals in mind. First, the CPU should be simple enough to make a physical build practical. Second, the CPU should be capable of complex operations. And third, the CPU should be easy to program. In the last episode, we learned how to turn a register into a counter, and we added a program counter to our CPU to help us keep track of instructions that we want to execute. In this episode, we'll learn about stacks, and we'll add a new register called the stack pointer to help our CPU manage stack memory. A stack is a portion of memory that our CPU can access quickly. Similar to RAM, the stack is made up of memory cells, each of which can store a number. However, instead of being able to access any part of memory we want, we can only access the top of the stack. We can put data on top of the stack, and we can take data off the top of the stack. The main advantage of this type of memory is that accessing it is usually faster than accessing RAM, since we don't need to figure out what address we want to access. We just need to quickly reference the top of the stack. We'll discuss some specific use cases for the stack when we design our CPU's instruction set. For now, we'll simply focus on implementing the stack in hardware so that we have it available to use later. In our CPU, we will have a 256-byte stack. We'll use a special register called the stack pointer to keep track of the top of the stack. Whenever we put something onto the stack, we'll decrement the stack pointer. And whenever we take something off the stack, we'll increment the stack pointer. This might seem backward at first, but it should become pretty obvious later why we would want to do things this way. So now we just need to design a register that can either increment or decrement its value. We already know how to build counters that can increment, so maybe something similar can work here. However, instead of a simple incrementer, we need a circuit that can both increment and decrement. Let's start by building a decrementer circuit. Similar to how we designed our incrementer in the last video, we'll start with a full adder, provide the inputs, and then simplify to get rid of the logic we don't need. We'll let the A input be the number we want to decrement, and the B input we'll hardwire to -1, which is just all ones if we're using 2's complement notation. Now, if the carry input is off, then the output will be A-1, and if the carry input is on, then the input will be A-1 plus 1, or just A. So let's invert the carry input and call it decrement, since the value is decremented if this input is on. Now let's start simplifying. Recall that if one of the inputs of an XOR gate is on, then the output will just be the inverse of the other input. So we can get rid of the first stage XOR gates and replace them all with the inverted A input. Similarly, if one input of an AND gate is on, then the output will just be the same as the other input. So we can discard all of the first stage AND gates and simply pass the A input through unmodified. Now we can invert the inputs of both of the remaining XOR and AND gates. The XOR gates don't change since inverting both inputs of an XOR gate doesn't affect its output, but the AND gates will all change into NOR gates. Now we can cancel out the NOT gates and change the OR gates into NOR gates. Then we can change those NOR gates into AND gates by inverting both their inputs. Finally, notice that the remaining OR gates are redundant, since if the A input is 1, then all of the AND gates will output 0 in all cases, so we can remove those as well. What we are left with is a decrementer circuit where each bit is made from an XOR gate, an AND gate, and a NOT gate. Now all of this switching around and rearranging that we just did might seem a bit convoluted, but now that we're at the end, you might see why we did all of that. Our decrementer circuit is now almost the same as an incrementer circuit. The only difference is that the AND gates of the decrementer have one of their inputs inverted. So if we swap all of those NOT gates with XOR gates, and wire all of the extra inputs of those XOR gates to another input, we can selectively invert the AND gate's inputs, allowing our decrementer to also function as an incrementer. We'll relabel the decrement input to increment, and we'll label that extra input as decrement. If neither is on, then the input gets passed unmodified to the output. If increment is on, then the input gets incremented, and if both increment and decrement are on, then the value gets decremented. Now we can make our stack pointer the same way we made our program counter, by adding our incrementer-decrementer circuit to a register and wiring its output to the register's multiplexer. We actually don't really need to ever load a value into the stack pointer though, so we'll just get rid of the multiplexer and have the incrementer-decrementer's output feed directly into the register's data input. Just like our program counter, we'll also add a reset input. Instead of resetting to 0 though, we'll reset to all ones. This is because the bottom of our stack will be the highest stack index, as we'll see in a moment. Let's also add some carry lookahead logic to help speed up the decrementer's operation. This will let our CPU run at much higher clock speeds when we build it for real later. I made a whole video on carry lookahead logic previously. I'll link to it if you want to check it out. Let's add our stack pointer to our CPU by wiring it into the address bus just like we did with the address registers and the program counter. Notice that we don't need any connections to the data bus, since we never need to load values into the stack pointer. Also notice that we only wire the stack pointer to the lowest 8 bits of the address bus. This will make it so that the last 256 bytes of RAM will function as our stack. The bottom of the stack will be at address FFFF. Now it should make sense why we decrement the stack pointer instead of incrementing it when we put data onto the stack. Since the stack actually lives in our RAM, that addressing convention made more sense to me when I was designing the CPU. You could do something totally different in yours though. It doesn't actually matter where the stack lives too much. For example, the 6502 processor's stack lives at RAM addresses 0100 to 01FF. And that processor was one of the most widely used 8-bit processors of its time. So it's really up to you to decide what makes sense for your design. I decided to put my stack at the end of RAM because it made wiring the address bus very easy. Wiring it this way also happens to mean that once I build my processor for real, it doesn't matter if I have all 64 kilobytes of RAM installed on the system. The stack will always reference the last 256 bytes of RAM regardless of how much RAM I have available. Now that we have a stack, we have unlocked the ability to do all sorts of useful tasks, from simple push and pop instructions to full-blown subroutine calls. With most of the hardware of our CPU complete, it begs the question though, what instructions do we want to be able to run on that hardware? We'll answer that question in the next video, where we'll start to design our CPU's instruction set. Until then, feel free to play around in Logisim and see what you can create. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.